Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to the MLS Power Ranking Show for Week 3 on Twitter Spaces. We are live there at 2 p.m. Eastern every single Tuesday, myself and Matt Doyle. And now you can listen on podcasts as well. Go search wherever you listen. MLS Today. You'll get the MLS Today show, which is live every day on Twitter Spaces with David Goss at 11 a.m. Eastern. You will get the Power Ranking Show. You'll get MLS After Dark on the weekends. You will get 7 days of MLS audio content running over every nook and cranny, every little tiny, maybe you think it's inconsequential, maybe it's huge to you, piece of news in the league. And of course, subscribe to Extra Time as well. We're on Mondays and Thursdays breaking down everything happening in Major League Soccer. We're going through the top 10 as always, though we're open to changes. So if you would like us to make a change in how we do this, we've talked about putting names into a hat and drawing 10. Any process you'd like to suggest is welcome, but it is Columbus Crew at 10, LA Galaxy at 9, Portland Timbers at 8, Colorado Rapids at 7, LAFC at 6, and the top 5 remains relatively unchanged. Nashville dropping, still 5. New England 4, despite that loss at home to RSL. Philly up a spot to 3. Seattle up 5 spots to 2, thanks to a 3-2 win against the LA Galaxy. And New York City FC are still hanging around at the top in the top 3. They are number 1 this week, ahead of a trip to Comunicaciones tonight. Tom Bogert, jump in here, man. Let's talk Columbus Crew at number 10, rolling along, 7 points, tied atop the Eastern Conference. But what I really want to talk about is what you reported last night about Gyasi Zardes. Walk us through it, man.
Yeah, what's going on, guys? Thanks for having me. I am not at the Boardwalk or New Jersey Turnpike this time, so you're welcome.
That's mundane. You're at home, like on the couch?
I'm just trying to be professional for you guys. I was on the deck, and then I was afraid that you guys might bristle at a gust of wind, and I might get yelled at again. So
okay, well, bring the desk vibes and tell us about Gyasi.
Yeah, so as I reported yesterday, according to sources across the league at a number of different clubs, it's just common knowledge that Gyasi Zardes is very available, if not, as a few sources kind of put it to me, as being like actively shopped. As of last night, at least, there have been no, I guess, advanced or serious discussions. It's again more of just the idea that, hey, like, this guy's available. They'd be very open to moving him. I'm sure for Gyasi in a World Cup year that the longer he goes without playing, it'll be less passive of, I'd consider it to, like, I want to go somewhere to play. Because he's in the last year of his contract, he will have a very big say in if or where this deal goes, because whatever the assets are that a team are giving up, you kind of have to do it with the okay from Gyasi and the knowledge that you're going to be able to work out a long-term deal. So this is one to watch. There's nothing close. I don't really know about anybody, where the market is, because, Ola Kamara is available. Like, Zardes, like, there's other forwards who could be available, and there hasn't been much movement there. So I really don't know, I guess, where the key takers would be for Gyasi Zardes.
3 starts for Miguel Berry so far for the Crew. Doyle and Caleb Porter says, hey, we want competition. We like competition, but you got a DP forward sitting on the bench. And that's what started the chatter from us in week 1. It makes sense he would be available. Who does he make sense for as far as who should be making the phone call to Tim Bezpachenko?
I mean, the 3 teams that jump off the top of my head are Colorado, Austin, and Sporting Kansas City. And Colorado being the most obvious one, even though Diego Rubio's had 2 really good weeks in a row. This is a team that already went out in the CCL basically because they didn't have a guy who scores the type of goals that Gyasi scored 80 times in his MLS career thus far. And obviously they have multiple DP slots open, and they have a lot of allocation cash that they're sitting on. So that is by far and away, though. Austin is up there as well. Austin have, I think, some flexibility in how they've built their roster, and they did add a couple of center forwards over the past year in Musajite, who's not starting because he's not goal dangerous in the exact way that Gyasi is. Musajite is not. And then Maxi Urruti, who's played really well through 3 weeks, but we all know how the Maxi Urruti story ends as a starter. So it's clearly those 3 teams, I think, right, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. But again, this is why this is kind of difficult to, I guess, project. And because you already laid it out. Like, Austin just signed Musajite in the summer, and they just signed Maxi Urruti in this offseason. They still have Danny Houston on the books. So I know that we talk about the sunk cost fallacy and stuff, but you look at that, and that's at least 3 senior center forwards, one of which is on a U22 initiative. And I don't know what they're paying Maxi Urruti, but he's been somebody who's been over the senior budget charge. pretty much the last 5 or 6 years of his MLS career. So he's probably not cheap. So what do you do there? Colorado, it makes sense in the terms of having an open DP spot and you can just put him there. But, he's not the kind of forward that I think like really fits perfectly within Robin Fraser's tactical system. Like I'd still do it if I was Colorado, but he's not, Diego Rubio or Jesus Ferreira or anybody who's going to have more like intricate kind of combinations with the midfielders or the wingers. He's more of like, he would fit really well in Austin. He fits really well in Columbus. Like those are kind of systems that maximize his best abilities. But so like, that's why, again, it's really difficult. And another guy, like, again, going back to it, Ola Kamara has been available this whole time. And it's a similar case in that he's somebody who has a large budget charge and the team's been opening/shopping him and there haven't been any takers because there's just not a lot of teams right now that have a desperate need at center forward with the ability to add somebody around like the max TAM charge. Like you said Sporting Kansas City, but they weren't able to get Josie. Like how would they fit Gyasi or Ola Kamara on their squad?
Do you think it would be a fit in Kansas City? I see Daniel Sperry, who covers the team, saying no, and I don't think I agree with him in that sense. Outside the logistics, and I pose this to you, Doyle, as well as Tom, do you think Gyasi would fit with what Sporting Kansas City would be looking for in that position?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that he's somebody who scores goals. Like he's not perfect, I guess, in terms of like the middle thirds, but like he works hard. He gets into duels. He presses well. He does all these things well, and that's just again a team that needs a proven goal scoring center forward. Like another team that I think it makes sense for is Nashville, and like even setting aside the jokes, I guess, of the veteran MLS striker, but like, wouldn't he be a perfect person to play next to Hani Mukhtar and be at the end? Like he's kind of fits their ethos really well. They have obviously CJ Sabong and Teal Bunbury, and this is not to mention Ake Loba, who for some reason Gary Smith doesn't seem to trust in that center forward spot. He has to be kind of the second forward where Hani Mukhtar is. But again, these are all teams that make sense. But what's the perfect fit at this stage of where teams kind of allocate their cap structure and their cap resources that they kind of, again, would have had looked at before the offseason started, obviously. And to add to this, like, I know of a couple teams that considered making a move for him in the winter. And that is newsworthy to me in the sense that teams knew that he could have been available. Like, this isn't like, oh my God, Gyasi Zardes is available? I had no idea. Like, teams were able to kind of forecast, like, hey, like, I know that Columbus likes Miguel Berry. Like, maybe there's a deal that could be had. So, again, that's why it's like a little difficult to forecast this market.
Doyle, before we let Crew go here, look, they beat Toronto this weekend. They're atop the Eastern Conference. We're talking about this trade because it's the most interesting news nugget of the moment. But Lucas Zelarayan is an early MVP candidate. He cannot miss outside the box, and they are getting results after a season in which they fell off after MLS Cup. What have you seen so far from the Crew?
The biggest thing is they're playing with more energy. It's still the same system. It's the same formation. It's mostly the same players out there, though Artur being back has helped a lot. But they're playing with more energy, and they're doing it further up the field. Our second spectrum tracking data, last year, the Crew were 20th in the league in sequences that started in the attacking third. This year, they're second. So they're getting after they've had a soft schedule. Vancouver and Toronto at home, at San Jose, like that's a soft schedule to start the year. But the way to beat bad teams or take points for bad teams is to get after them, put them on the back foot, and punish them. And the Crew have been doing that in a way that they didn't do last year, basically at all, or I should say basically until the end of the season where they made that too little, too late push to try to get over the line. So it's honestly, it just comes down to a higher line of confrontation and a couple of guys, Derek Etienne being one of them, Zelarayan being another, who are playing better than they did in 2021. And that's a pretty good formula for the Crew. I mean, they basically won 2020 MLS Cup that way. So,
at Red Bulls next, home against Nashville, at Philly, home against Orlando, at Kansas City. It's a tough 5-game stretch for the Crew. We'll learn more about them. On to number 9. Appreciate you, Tom. At Tom Bogert on Twitter. Tommy Scoops in your heart and mind. Always here to break things down. Michele, if you're there, man, unmute yourself. We're talking Galaxy. Down 3 spots on the back of a 3-2 loss in Seattle, a game that felt like a playoff match. Chicharito gets a goal. That's always good for the Galaxy. But when you give up 3 goals from set pieces, that's less good. What did you see, and what have you seen so far from the Galaxy, Michele?
How are you guys? Great to be here. And damn it, I hate following Tom.
It's the worst.
It's a difficult task.
All right, do your best, man.
I'll try. But yeah, it's a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, and like Greg Vanney said immediately after the game, he could just think of one emotion, and it was infuriating. He was in a really terrible mood in the post-game press conference on a game that they controlled, and they had it, and they lost it in a couple of set pieces and what he called a nonsense, dumb penalty kick.
Interesting. We are watching that nonsense dumb penalty right now on YouTube, if you're watching there. Of course, it's Julian Araujo, who was just chock full, brimming with talent, but got lured in by Fredy Montero. Doyle, how much do you read into these set piece failures and this sort of like mental focused decision-making failure for the Galaxy in the big picture? Because they had 2 shutouts before this, and that's what a lot of people were talking about. Hey, have things changed?
Yeah, it's not nothing, right? And I think it explains the gap between the Galaxy and the top teams in MLS right now, because the Sounders didn't play well. And the Sounders still found a way to win this game, and I don't think the Galaxy can really do that. That said, and you know, I know Michaela, you've seen this as well. Like, this team is just playing better than they were last year. They're harder to break down from open play. They have better players in deep central midfield, and it looks like Efraín Álvarez as well has ratcheted his game up a notch. And it's not perfectly clicking, but they just look like a better team than they were in 2021.
Yeah, and I don't think, I know it's early, it's just 3 games, but I don't think we're giving Greg Vanney credit enough, especially after the cleanup they did, getting rid of Sebastian Lletget, getting rid of Jonah Dos Santos, bringing Mark Delgado. I heard that's the way he wants
it's Mark,
to
man.
be called now.
It's a hard habit to break.
Yes, sir. And I think we're seeing the hand of Greg Vanney. He said it. He needed time. He wanted to make some changes, and he brought a player like Mark that he knew from Toronto. The thing with Galaxy, Matt and Andrew, it's that this team, it's the lack of depth. It's worrisome. When you see the bench, I don't think they can afford to lose Chicharito, not even one game. All you can see is Joveljic, Sasha Kljestan. When Efra is playing, the option is Victor Vasquez and vice versa. So this is the team that has surprised me, how fast Greg Vanney has find that balance in the midfield with Raveloson and Marky Delgado, and how solid they're looking in the back line, especially with the emergence of Dupuis. I'm sorry if I just butchered his last name. I don't know how he prefers to be called. And now with Eric Zabaleta, I think at the end, Zabaleta is going to take the spot next to Dupuis. But yeah, it's difficult to project this team far away in the season because, again, I think Vanney needs more time, but the depth, it's a little bit worrisome.
When you're in meetings at TUDN and you're covering games and you're watching games and you're talking about MLS, what place does Efraín Álvarez have in those conversations?
He's huge. With the Mexican fans and Mexican media, he's huge. I was talking with Matt the other day after the Charlotte game. He's viewed now as a kind of a light at the end of the tunnel at the Mexican national team. Efraín's in a good place right now, mentally. I think, like Matt has said several times, he appears to have turned the corner, especially mentally. And the way he approaches the game and the way a professional athlete and soccer player has to conduct himself out of the field and on the field, but especially out of the field. And we're talking about what it means to Mexico, the Mexican national team, to have Héctor Herrera at 31 years old coming back to MLS and not having that next big star, new generational player playing already in Europe. So they see Efra as a guy that can take that spot in the midfield or in the creative midfield. So, and now that he's in a better place mentally and physically, and now that he's committed to Mexico, because that's another thing that was bothering him mentally, that he was caught up between Mexico and the USMNT. So now that his mind is in the right place and he knows he's with Mexico, and Tata has already talked to him and convinced him that he's going to be a big part of the team. And I expect him to be on the next call-up. I think it's coming up today, later or tomorrow. So he should be there. And I think Efra is viewed as a big part of the future for Mexico.
Home against Orlando, at Portland, LAFC at home, in the first El Tráfico. That's the next three for the LA Galaxy, who dropped 3 spots by going on the road to the number 2 team in these power rankings and barely losing. That's interesting from the voters. I'm not trying to introduce any scandal here, but I'm just saying that's a little interesting. Michele, great to talk to you, man. Thanks for jumping in with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, as always.
All right. We love the coverage there from Michele across the board to the end, etc. Let's talk Portland Timbers at number 8. I invited Chris Reifer in here to talk Timbers. Chris,
good morning.
What's up, man?
How's it going?
Yes.
Hey, Wiebe, I love that you dropped the felt like a playoff game line in week 3. That feels like the commentator's equivalent of Phil Neville's rant this last weekend.
Wow. That's disrespect, man. I'm about to treat you like Gonzalo Higuain in this segment. I'm going to tell you right now. Look, I called you in here because I need top quality. But, Chris, when you've been here before, I haven't been getting quality performances from you. So what are you going to do now? We're relying on you for the best Timbers takes and analysis. All the other guests that come in here, they give me their top takes and analysis. But when you roll in, I got nothing from you.
Hey, I give you – I can't guarantee you top takes, but I give you takes and I also give you a little bit of dragging.
Okay.
Hey, look. So in a game that did not feel like a playoff game, the Timbers beat Austin 1-0 at Providence Park over the course of the weekend.
Well, it felt a little like an RSL playoff game.
No, RSL playoff games at Providence Park feel like multi-goal losses.
That's
this
true.
was not that. To be honest, Austin was pretty good in the game. I thought they did a nice job of disrupting the Timbers, of making it difficult for them to build up, especially with the pressing. They really kept the Timbers from being able to launch their attacks from the places where they like to. And it took the Timbers a while to figure that out. And I'm frankly not sure they entirely did over the course of the game. So a tip of the cap to Austin, who, look, I agree with sort of the prevailing wisdom, vastly improved from a year ago.
Let me ask you this, Chris. Where is Sebastian Blanco in his recovery? Because he hasn't been starting. He's only been playing spot minutes at the end of games so far. He has not been influential when he's been on the pitch, including in this game. Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing in terms of that? And is there a timeline that you've heard for when they expect him to be, if not necessarily a 90-minute player, at least a starting player who can give them a good hour, 70 minutes or whatever it is, and kind of impact the game in the way that we've seen from him the past 4 years?
I don't get the sense that there's sort of a strict timeline that they're looking at to sort of make that move. I think it's a matter of they're sort of slowly building up fitness. But, when a team is really intentionally building up a player's fitness, there's usually kind of a progression you can see in the number of minutes that they're getting. That doesn't seem to be the way that they're deploying Blanco. They seem to be bringing on Blanco, in sort of what you like to call the El Seno role right now, which I think raises the question about whether that's how they see things, or at least are considering things as an option going forward. I expect Blanco to start games this year. I expect him to start a decent number of games this year. But I think it's fair to say, as I think you're getting at, that he's not there yet. And I think it probably has as much to do with fitness, with his little bit longer offseason than some other folks had, than it does necessarily health. I haven't heard additional things or that there have been any setbacks or anything like that with respect to his health. Frankly, he didn't look fit in the first couple of games of the year. I will say, though, that I thought he looked, even though he was not sort of the DP caliber playmaker that we've seen him be so often in the past, I thought he looked quite a bit sharper against Austin than he did in the last couple of games, even if that's not a particularly high standard to me. So I think it's getting there, but it might be a bit of a process yet.
Because you mentioned that you have not heard of a setback with Sebastian Blanco, and that's good news. There were reports of a setback with Eric Williamson, though. Did you see that, and do we know what the timeline is for him?
You just summarized the entirety of what we know about it. That there was apparently a setback. Eric went on was on a podcast a couple weeks ago and said that he was close to a return. It sounds like that is delayed to some extent, and we don't know much more than that. Somewhat providing a little bit of salve to that wound. If there is something to be excited about for Timbers fans coming out of the game this last weekend, it is that David Ayala, the new young money signing, out of Estudiantes de La Plata in Argentina. Played the last 15 or 20 minutes, and frankly, in that 15 or 20 minutes, he may have been the best player on the field. He looked really, really, really good. And it's 15 or 20 minutes. It is, so all of the caveats with that apply. But he's a player, I think, who piqued a lot of the interest of Timbers fans who were watching that game.
Outside of Ashala, who is or what is the sort of the under the radar positive so far for a team that's got just one win, and this was the one, but are undefeated so far?
Yeah, I think it's been the play of both Bill Tuiloma and Zach McGraw at center back. Those two guys, certainly Tuiloma, are creating a bit of a center back controversy with the incumbents of Dario Zuparic and Laris Mabiala. I think there are real questions about who sort of the first choice will be. I think it's difficult, frankly, to pull Bill Tuiloma in particular off the field. He scored the goal with a good header from delightful service from Jimmy Chara to win the game, but has also been leading the line, and full credit to him for that. I think that has been the thing that, frankly, has saved the team. The first month of the season or so has often been a horror show for the Timbers. And I think when losing their top two center backs, a lot of folks suspected that it may be the same this year. That hasn't been the case. The results have been, on the whole, pretty good. And it's been because those two guys have really stepped up to fill that void.
All right, it's about 60 minutes in here, Chris, and we've had middling production from you. So as the Phil Neville of this show, I'm going to have to yank you.
Hey, I understand. I understand. I'll go enjoy the rest from the bench and cook up some spice for you to come back and drag me some more next week.
Wonderful. You'll hear your name in the press conference afterwards. All right, that is the Portland Timbers at number 8. On to number 7 we go. Big thanks to Chris Reifer jumping in with us. Always love having him on this show. Matt Pollard is here to talk Rapids.
Gentlemen, how are we? Happy afternoon.
Yeah, he is the host of the Rapids podcast, Rapids 96 podcast on Twitter, if you want to get it. Hey, that was a big overreaction to CCL in that opening loss for the Rapids, huh? They're back, baby. They're back.
They're still working on things, but certainly they're closer to the team they've been the last 2 weeks than I'll say the team that they were in either CCL game or against LAFC. Rapids Twitter has a lot of Schadenfreude and can overreact a whole lot. So I mean, after that loss against LAFC, it was full on. It was, are you DEFCON 1 or are you DEFCON 2 was the conversation, and I was just like thinking, let them get a full week, let them get some rest, focus in on an MLS game, improve some of their principles and everything, and we'll see an improved performance against Atlanta. Back-to-back wins, Diego Rubio with 2 goals. I don't hear a lot of people complaining about that DP striker right now.
Should they be, though? Like where are you on Rubio? Because we've seen him have some good years in the past, but never really as a full-time number 9. And look, we did see what happened last year in the playoffs in February in CCL. This team did not have a number 9 to put away the types of chances that can win you those types of games.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I still think Diego Rubio has a role on this team. He's a very important leader. He's been an occasional captain when Jack Price has been out. There's a lot of all of the non-goal scoring things that Robin Fraser cares about with his front 3 and especially with his front center forward. Diego Rubio does very well and does very selflessly. I think it's worth pointing out he had 2 injury stints last season and he never really looked settled. He had a proper preseason. He was scoring in preseason. That didn't really work against Comunicaciones as well, but I think you can see that he's confident, and I think he's going to have a role to play on this team. I think 10 to 12 goals is reasonable for him, but I think understandably, as long as the Rapids don't have a DP striker or someone with a better pedigree either in Europe or within MLS, if we're going to talk about Gyasi Zardes potentially, there's a ceiling to really what they can do. And so this is a team that can beat the teams that they're supposed to. I still feel very confident this is a playoff team. I think their ceiling this year with Nashville coming into the West is probably them being one of the lower home playoff teams. I think I had them 4th in my table, but if they go up against Seattle, a Nashville, a New England, those teams have types of players that the Rapids don't. And as we've seen the last 2 years, when those players shine, the Rapids usually lose in the playoffs.
Completely agree, Matt. This is solidly a playoff team in my mind. When you have a group of guys that are going to play hard every night and know exactly what's being asked from them, from Robin Fraser, and have a chip on their shoulder, that's a good recipe in MLS. Now, let's talk Gyasi. Do you think he would be a good fit? Do you think there's any way that Porig would look across the Eastern Conference and the crew and say, okay, I've got the allocation money. We've sold some players. We might get some more down the line in Cole Bassett if he gets a permanent move. We got the money from Sam Vines. He was a homegrown. Do you think that they would consider this, and would it be a fit for you?
I think they should definitely consider it. I'd be almost shocked at this point if Porik hasn't at least thought about calling Columbus. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. From what I remember about watching Gyasi, obviously as someone who covers a team in the West, I don't know that he's as active as a presser. Obviously, he's pretty decent in the air. That would help with, set pieces FC and everything. And look, the fact is, you get him in a position to score goals. He puts the ball in the back of the net in ways that Diego Rubio has been a little bit more streaky, in ways that I would say Jonathan Lewis maybe a year or two ago would have been streaky. Lewis, I thought, had a very good season last season. He got off the snide against Atlanta as well. I think he's been fantastic from the run of play and build up with Lucas Estevez on the left, but I think Gyasi would be a fit. If I remember correctly, I think he was on $1.4 million guaranteed compensation last year. That'd make him the highest paid player for the Rapids since Skel Shingashi and Tim Howard. I don't know how that would work in the budget. How much of their GAM do they want to leave out? And you also have to account for the fact that there's the loan that's expiring for Lucas Estevez. I would think the Rapids want to hold on to him. And there's also, with Abubakar Keita tearing his ACL, I think there's still a real question what the Rapids do at center back once Austin Trusty leaves for Arsenal. So big questions for Porik Smith to answer. He's typically come up with creative and unorthodox solutions to them, though.
What if Trusty doesn't go to Arsenal immediately? They were going to have to loan him, it seemed like. What if you're just keeping the loan in place for the time being? I know he'd rather go in the summer where he has a full preseason, but I don't know. Just popped into my head.
So I think it's July 17th officially. The Rapids do play a game on the 16th of July. So, I guess that's a conversation they might be willing to have. I think that'd be an interesting thing for Porik to bring up in one of those KSE conference calls. I'd imagine Trusty, coming off of playing at altitude, and having a really good middle of his season, he'd want to go in fully fit into trying to insert himself into the Premier League team, or at the very least prove himself to Mikel Arteta to the point where they set him up with a good loan stint. I could see why the Rapids want that. I could see why Arsenal, if they're spending big and trying to get back into Europa League or Champions League conversation, might be open to that. I don't know that Trusty would necessarily think that that's the best move for him.
All right. Anything on the top of your mind? That was a harebrained idea I'm throwing out there, but hey, it's possible. Anything else in your mind with the Rapids right now? Like, this is a team that doesn't often get the national conversation. What should we be talking about? What's the right narrative?
I think Mark Anthony Kaye has been very effective as in the middle right there. He did get a goal contribution, scored the second goal on the weekend. Obviously, their first goal for on a set piece for the Rapids this season. I think we've seen him kind of fit into. If you look at his stats and kind of what he's doing when he doesn't have the ball in the final third, it's very similar to what Kellen Acosta does in terms of like a jack of all trade, doing a little bit of everything on both phases of play. I do think he's capable of being more of an attacking player for the Rapids. I'm kind of curious. Max hasn't started the last two games, and he's kind of been working with the team as well. What's their kind of a relationship internally? The Rapids, when they talk about their three center midfield, it's a 6 and 2/8, but typically it's been a slightly 6-8 and then a slightly 10-ish 8. So you could think Kay's been more of the 10, and then Acosta's been more of the 6 in that relationship. Do the two kind of go back and forth? That's something I'm kind of curious about tactically, given I think how big and exciting of a young player Max is for the Rapids, and given I think the role that Mark Anthony Kaye will have with the team as he continues to elevate as potentially a best 11 conversation guy for the Rapids, and then certainly a very relevant player for the Canadian men's national team.
At Houston, coming up this week in RSL, at Dallas, at Minnesota, then home against Charlotte. 5 games, 3 away, but an opportunity for the Rapids to keep climbing 7th in these power rankings. Matt Pollard, host of the Rapids podcast. Matt, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you very much, gents. Have a good day.
All right, Max Bretos is up next. Max, I sent you an invite. We're talking LAFC at number 6. Jump in there, Max, or invite yourself, and I'll let you in whenever you see this or hear this. Down a spot, Doyle, or LAFC, but Carlos Vela is back, and boy, that's disrespect from the voters. They went to Miami. Like they went to Miami. That's a good win.
No, it's fine. The top six in the power rankings, as you said before the show even started, it's all like everybody's pretty convinced that these are the top six teams in the league, and I think it's fair to be a little bit questioning of LAFC, given that Vela's been in and out of the lineup already, given that they struggled a little bit generating high level chances in this one. They needed a patented Breck Shea breakdown in order to get this first goal. But like this team has looked good through 3 games, and they're unbeaten through 3 games, and so I guess a little bit disrespectful, but I don't think anybody should lose any sleep over it.
Max Bretos, I see you in here, man. Unmute yourself. Reveal yourself.
Yeah, I'm here.
7 points, top of the West. Are you watching training right now? Is that what we're party to?
Yes, training just ended. Training's been great under the new regime. I will say this, and it was in the old one too. I've lost a lot of sleep, Matt Doyle. A lot of sleep about being ranked number 6. Okay, so speak for yourself.
What did you see against Miami, and what have you seen overall this year, Max? I think this is the first time we're chatting with you.
Oh, great! It's been tremendous to watch these games so far, and there's an improvement in a lot of areas. Although there certainly is a feeling when you look at certainly the players at the top, and I would include Carlos Vela, who had that hat trick. But you look at those players in that front 3, the ceiling is still so high, and in the midfield. And when you look at I guess the more attacking-oriented midfielders in Acosta and Sifu, so it's really good. The defense is massively improved. And clearly, Steve Cherundolo has done his work to get this team ready for this season. He knows his players. They have a very deep roster, and I was wondering how that depth would manifest itself over these weeks. And they've used a lot of players, so the sub patterns have been great. The picking the starting 11s week to week have all paid off thus far. And again, there's that thing swirling inside that says, okay, this team certainly has the potential to put up a big number. It's different. It's a different LAFC. It still has the same kind of guidelines and foundation on how they play, but they are very pragmatic in a lot of ways and just good habits. I think they're developing good habits, and bringing a lot of veteran players goes a long way in doing that. And obviously, having allowed 1 goal this season and 3, and not really many chances, is a tremendous development. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot still that I think people are waiting for to see what happens in the weeks ahead, which could put LAFC much higher in those rankings at some point.
Max, let me ask you this. One of the things that I think we all realize needs to happen for this team to sort of hit its potential is for Brian Rodriguez to hit his potential. And there have been signs of that. Certainly the end of the game against the Timbers was a good one. But he's still not consistently getting on the board with either goals or assists. Is that real? Is it like he's still just the same guy he was the last 2 years? Or is there more happening underneath and it's just not quite revealing itself to the average fan?
Yeah. Well, look, supporters generally would look at Brian Rodriguez and you equate the fact that he is this high-profile DP who came in with a lot of pizzazz and a lot of background and high marks across the board that he would do much better. I will say that he still needs to get those goals. And there is some moments there where maybe the ball gets turned over, where he has to make a better decision. But he goes 90 minutes every game. And this is a guy that is generally loved by his team. When you watch training, they're all there. He's always got his arm around someone. It's really good energy coming from Brian Rodriguez, which you may not have seen in previous years. I would say, obviously, the hat trick from Carlos Vela stands above, but he's made the next 2 important plays this season, in my estimation. Obviously, the assist in Portland and up the card near Miami. He's there. He just needs the goals. Everything else about Brian Rodriguez has done is they don't say, there's no criticism about him. And I think when you look at what he logs on a game day, that tells you all you need. We wait for the goals. That obviously is a big part, and you want to limit those turnovers. But everything else from Brian Rodriguez, high marks. Not just from me, but from some of the people who've been watching him, and I think it comes through in some of the plays he's made this season.
LAFC winners in Miami, 2-0. Max, we would keep you here, but we keep dropping out with you. So I'm catching like every third word.
Oh,
that
sorry.
training facility. You're like, it's all good. You're inside of a brick cube somewhere. We're trying to get that the transmission through to you. But good talking to you, man. We will talk a bunch more this season.
Sounds
all right?
good. I am outdoors, but you never know with these connections these days.
Where are these towers at? Where are these
Build the
towers?
towers.
LAFC at number 6. Nashville are at number 5. Big thanks to Max Bredos. Check out the Soccer OG on YouTube with Max, as well as on the broadcast for LAFC. Down 4 spots for Nashville. That they're still in the top 5, Doyle, in the midst of this road trip is pretty impressive, but this performance was not particularly impressive against FC Dallas.
No, they basically didn't threaten Dallas at all. And Dallas has been pretty decent through 3 games, but it's not like they don't have the best defense I've ever seen. And Nashville just never really troubled them. Whereas on the flip side, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing Dallas pull that Nashville diamond apart and able to create danger from width in a way that neither Minnesota nor Seattle did in the first 2 weeks of the season. So there's film on it now. There's, everybody knows what Nashville's going to be doing on this trip. They're going to be putting numbers behind the ball and try to hurt you on set pieces, try to hurt you on counterattacks, and try to stay compact. And it's your job to be the protagonist and to get at them and to make them less compact, make them more spread out. Dallas worked on that, and in the final 10 minutes of the game, they did it. Nashville didn't really have any answers. I'm not going to say it's back to the drawing board for Gary Smith, because this team has been too good for too long for it to be that type of thing. But they played that 3-5-2 last year to good effect, and it worked for a reason. I think they have an opportunity to go back to it selectively during the rest of this trip, especially with Dax McCarty looking to have picked up a little bit of a knock and looking maybe not 100% coming out of this game.
Here's the rest of this road trip for Nashville. At RSL this weekend. If you ask, Zoran Krneta, that's not that hard, but it seems like a difficult matchup. At Columbus, at Sporting Kansas City, at San Jose, at LA Galaxy. And then they're home, the first game, at the new stadium, the 1st of May against Philadelphia. And then it's RSL at home after that. How many points do you think they pick up from these next 5, Doyle? How many is a good number for Gary Smith to target? You've got a win, a draw, and a loss so far. 4 points from 3, pretty darn good.
Yeah, 4 from 3 is good. If they take 6 from these last 5, I think that's good enough. 7 or more, and they're in really, really nice shape coming home from this odyssey that they start the year with. So and look, this is a team that specializes in getting points on the road. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they went 7, 8 points or better. They have the ability to do that, especially if they stay more buttoned up defending set pieces, which is something that we've been talking about with this team for quite a while now. But we'll see, because this performance did raise a couple of red flags, a couple of warning signs are flashing after this one, Wiebe.
Even after those warning signs, they still almost got away with it. I mean, it's a PK where Paul Arriola really, he kind of plays Jack Mayer like a fiddle, lets him run into him and goes down in the 82nd. And then if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing Alan Velasco's incredible debut goal. Those are plays that if you're Gary Smith, you're thinking, okay, I know we gave up some opportunities, but bend don't break is kind of a mantra here. I think they got something to build on. This will be a disappointment, but back to the drawing board for them. Let's go to number 4. And let's go to the New England Revolution. Meg Linehan is here with us on one ankle, but that doesn't matter when you're on Twitter Spaces. You just need the audio, Meg, and that's a beautiful thing.
It's just leg is optional, right? So
exactly,
all good. I'm just happy to be invited. I feel like I am going to be in an interesting situation trying to handle some real MLS talk today.
Tell us about what you thought of this game at the weekend as we watched the highlights on a white field with an orange ball with wind blowing around. These are very New England conditions, and Carles Gil is very much not into New England conditions.
I mean, it is really funny just because obviously the Wednesday game against Pumas, right? And then, yes, I would argue the weekend game was a lot worse. I mean, I remember going into our work chat and just being like, is anyone else watching this right now? Because this has to be one of the funniest games I've ever tried to sit down and watch, just in terms of like the rate of snowfall felt really absurd in the first part of that first half against Real Salt Lake. But, I think it is kind of funny to see the difference in Wednesday night, a 3-0 win, and then I don't know, maybe I'm feeling a little bit harsher about the Revs right at the moment, but I was just not really impressed at the way that they collapsed for the last 30 minutes or so against Real Salt Lake. You get in the sub with Josie Altidore, he immediately scores at home for the first time, and then you allow 3 unanswered goals. It just felt not like a great sign at this point in the season, but it's also still pretty early, and obviously it didn't hurt them too much on the power rankings.
The best part, by the way, on these YouTube highlights that we're watching here, and I know that you can't see them, Meg, but was like the progression. Before halftime, the entire field is covered in white, and then after halftime, the highlights start to show swaths of green that have been shoveled off.
My favorite was during the run of play, the dude trying to shovel right across midfield and like realizing, oh no, they're coming near me. I gotta scamper.
It's like playing pickup basketball and you're trying to play on the wrong hoop while everybody's on the other end, taking a shot and realize there's a fast break coming straight at your face. Carles Seal, where does this rank on post game interviews that you've heard in your life? Him basically saying, "I don't effing like the snow. We shouldn't effing play in the snow. This was effing crazy."
It's really up there. To be fair, I cover Megan Rapinoe on a regular basis,
fair.
So it is pretty hard to compete with her. But just in terms of, I can't speak to it. Like I have a broken leg because I'm a skier, right? So like I don't necessarily mind the snow, but that first half like really did feel a little bit ridiculous. Just in terms of maybe could you have postponed the game even 30 minutes to let that band of snow through and allow the field to be cleared a little bit? Maybe, right? Would have made a huge difference. But, in terms of that video, I mean, I watched it like, I think 3 times right off the bat, just in terms of sheer frustration, but also like just perfect confusion at what you're going to get at Foxborough at this time of the year. Like it delighted me as a native.
It's elite body language from Carlos, I got to say.
Incredible. But let's go back to that breakdown over the final 30 minutes of the game. They got beat over the top. They got beat on a set piece. They got beat on just like kitchen sink buildup at the end from RSL. I know we're, as Revs fans are probably concerned overall just about the buildup, but like what tactically was happening? Was it one particular thing, or was it the entire team up 2-0 and just switching off?
I think it was a little bit of, like you can't excuse the conditions, right? Like you can't use that in your defense, but I do think that obviously it does play some form of role just in terms of how you're trying to adjust to the game. But I think really some of those goals were pretty inexcusable, and I don't know whether it was just maybe the subs changing the feel, right? Like if Carlos Hill is that frustrated by the conditions and you have him as part of that 3 substitution, right? Like basically 30 minutes out, and then all of a sudden that's where the game changes, where you get 4 goals happening. And so I don't know if there's anything that really stood out when I was watching it in terms of tactics, but it feels like those are goals that the Revs would not have allowed, like especially last season, right? Just in terms of defensive looseness, it whether it was communication or whether it was positioning, there was just something that has not felt quite as dialed in, especially in the RSL game, especially in that last 30 minutes.
Felt pretty dialed in against Pumas in leg 1.
Yeah.
3-0 winners there. Now they go to Estadio Olímpico Universitario on Wednesday, FS1 Turiene at 10:15 p.m. Eastern. At that point, they might be the 3rd team through to the semis. I say might because Montreal is going to host Cruz Azul down 1-0 right before that. We care about CCL immensely. We are accustomed to following very closely your coverage of the women's game here in the U.S. and Concacaf and just in the entire world. How much do you care about CCL?
I think it's interesting. I think that it is it feels like your chaos version of some of what we get in the NWSL. And we don't really, I think what's really fascinating for me as someone who covers women's soccer is that we're only just now starting to see NWSL teams kind of interact with teams from Mexico a little bit. And we desperately want more of it on the women's side. So to see CCL and see what a tournament could maybe look like, and obviously the kind of the relative power balance is very different on the women's side, but I think it does provide a very interesting additional competition format alongside the regular season and having to balance these things. I mean, we saw the rotation from the Revs against Real Salt Lake, partly because of the Pumas game. So, I think it does do something different. Do I super care if the Revs win CCL versus, winning the Shield or winning MLS Cup? I would definitely rank it lower for sure, just on my point of view.
Interesting. Tell us, the folks that are listening, and obviously, again, go check out Meg at The Athletic and on Twitter and everything she does to cover NWSL and the women's national team and the women's game in general. Tell me how you're from New England, right?
Yes, yeah, from north of Boston. So
when did the Revs come into your life as something that you followed / cared about in any way?
I mean, I definitely went to Revs games a lot as a kid. I was an intern for the Boston Breakers in the first Women's Pro League, but we also went to Revolution games. I remember going to a U.S. men's national team game, also at Old Foxborough Stadium in 2002 against Jamaica, I want to say. So always been present, but I got very much back into the Revs as my safe / painful sports fandom space. Back around 2012, 2013, especially. So,
gotta find something to disappoint you, right?
Exactly.
That's the beauty of sports. Anyway, Revs gonna play Pumas on Wednesday at 10:15 p.m. Eastern. FS1 2DNA. We'll check back in again this year, Meg. Best of luck with that ankle / lower leg injury. I know how those things go.
The joys of crutches.
All right, let's keep it rolling. Matthew DeGeorge in here for number 3. That is the Philadelphia Union. Matthew, unmute yourself if you don't mind here. Over at Delco Sports, covering the Union. What's up, man?
Thanks for having me. I'm just glad to have escaped what was a loop of you asking Meg the same question over and over again on my spaces, where I assumed I had messed something up. So I assumed I had broke it.
That's funny. It was just hitting the loop button for you, and it was completely silent for me. Philadelphia maybe getting the loop against San Jose. This is sort of what we see from the Quakes all the time, but you got to get the results that are in front of you. What did you see in this game from the Union perspective?
Oh, it was loopy. Yeah, it's kind of hard to judge the Union so far because they haven't had a ton of normal games. Up in Montreal, you have the turf as a mitigating factor. It was very cold on Saturday, which compared to what the New England game wasn't all that much. But against San Jose, you don't really get a normal one soccer team versus another soccer team, both playing the same sort of soccer. And then their next game, they're headed to New York City. So it's a little tough to judge early on. But 7 points from 3 games is not something that I think is ever much of a disappointment, and it's certainly something I think the Union will gladly take this early in the season.
What are you following the closest right now in your coverage of the team?
So I think the limiting factor this year is going to be what the strikers produce. And obviously the Union haven't had a chance to see that yet. Corey Burke started a bunch of games this season. That wasn't the design when you bring in 2 DP level strikers. Julian Carranza has an assist, and he seems to have been playing a little bit better, but obviously he misses the last game with the red card suspension. Mikel Ura has all kinds of delays getting over here. He gets a brief cameo in Montreal, and then he's injured for this game. So that's really going to be what defines, I think, this team this season. They have the structure that is retained from really the last 2 or 3 years, and it's adding on those years. And we haven't had an opportunity to see what that's going to look like yet. But I think that's going to be kind of the work in progress on this team.
What's the early talk on Ura in the from Jim, from the other players, from seeing training? If you've seen it so far, what's the early impressions?
I mean, he looks good. He's an imposing striker. He's got an interesting blend of quickness and speed. You saw him get on the break a lot against Montreal, even though they were down a man and they were up a goal, so they were able to counterattack a lot. He kind of missed a couple of chances there, didn't make the best decision on the one where he could have squared to Quinn Sullivan all alone. But I think, that's rightly written off to some opening game jitters. I think he is definitely a guy who has a skill set that's going to complement well. You saw what Sergio Santos did last week in being that guy that makes the first run off of possession in midfield and getting in behind. And whenever Sergio's healthy, he can do that. I think you've seen from Carranza the ability to also do something similar in the goal that Gazdag scores to win in Montreal, of taking down a long ball and creating a chance. I think Ura has the ability to play off of both of those guys really well. And it'll be interesting to see, in games where he's able to get out in the open field more and has a full 90 minutes, what he can kind of do to attack.
100 regular season wins for Jim Curtin, Matthew, and I'll let you go on this one. That seems like a lot more than many thought he would get in this role for many years.
Yeah, I mean, considering he had 17 wins in the first 52 games he was in charge, I think, it's pretty remarkable. And when you consider, I mean, only 13 coaches in MLS history have done it. Only 9 have done it with the same team, which includes Sigi Schmid doing it with 2 different teams. It's pretty remarkable. Jim's not one that is going to compliment himself very much, but the closest thing that he came to a compliment of himself was that he's done things in the right way a little bit. And it's been important for him in managing the transition from what existed before Ernie Stewart took over to then when Ernie Stewart was in charge to then Ernst Tanner coming in. Those are 2 really different styles of play and kind of mentalities, and he's been able to learn from both of those guys and been able to adapt and change in really beneficial ways, and he reaps the benefits for it. He maybe got a little lucky early in his tenure in that the Union as an organization was a little bit of a disaster, so no one was going to win with some of the players that he maybe had early on, and he's been able to learn and grow, and I think that's important, and it sets him up as a coach who has a bright future in Philadelphia and has a bright future whenever his tenure here ends.
Philadelphia Union doing pretty well so far. 7 points, a draw and 2 wins. Minnesota at Montreal, San Jose at New York City coming up next. That'll be a big game this weekend. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we'll finish in the top 2 and hope that Seth Vertelny doesn't break this Twitter Spaces into a million pieces. Open wide for some pro soccer wire, Seth. I've already used that joke in DM, so it's not new. Seattle at number 2, up 5 spots. What's up, man? Good to have you.
Hey, guys. Happy to be in the spaces.
Yeah, it's a little meta there, isn't it? Tell us about the new project, first and foremost. From goal to pro soccer wire. What's coming?
I know, right? I thought that when I left goal, I probably wouldn't still be in soccer, but here I am, opening wide for some pro soccer wire. Really excited. USA Today has decided, USA Today / Gannett have decided to cover soccer and on a higher level, a bit more extensively than they have in the past, and they're starting a new soccer website, which I'm going to manage, and we're kind of building this thing from the ground up, and we're really excited to see what it becomes. We're looking to launch this spring sometime, exact date TBD, but yeah, I mean, I think anytime that a big media company recognizes that, soccer is a sport that's worth devoting serious resources to, I think we can all be excited about that.
Seth, you're covering soccer in the U.S. That means MLS, NWSL, presumably U.S. men's and women's national team. Will you go down the ranks into USL and college? Is it going to be coverage of Yanks abroad in Europe and in South America? All of the above?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is TBD. We're still kind of formulating the vision for that. I think the thing that we want to keep in mind is that we want to cover the sport in a way that an American audience will react to. So, that is going to be kind of all encompassing. I think, like, in terms of big European teams, big European players, because an American audience cares about that, or at least a lot of people in the US. But we also can't forget where we are. We're in Concacaf, and we want to make sure that we're a place that people that follow the game on the men's and women's side in the U.S. and Mexico and Canada can come to and expect to see their favorite teams and players covered. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a work in progress. But yeah, I think we're just looking to be a place where the American soccer fan, no matter who you follow, what you're interested in is going to find there's going to be something for everyone.
Well, as you said, we're in CONCACAF. The Seattle Sounders are in CONCACAF, specifically CONCACAF Champions League, this week in their second leg after beating Club Leon 3-0 last week and then beating the LA Galaxy at home 3-2. What have you seen from these Sounders, and what are you expecting to see from them in leg 2 later on this week?
Yeah, it was a really un-MLS team in CCL performance. I think, when they got up 2-0, we've all seen these kinds of games where you want them to go and push for that third, but you're afraid that the Mexican team's going to come down and score and then take the momentum heading into the second leg. But it was just a dominant performance from start to finish. That third goal that they got at the end was really deserved. It could have been more. They completely outclassed Leon, and they did it without Raul Ruiz-Diaz and Nicolas Ladero, which was just so impressive. And as somebody who's a big fan of overhyping young kids, Obed Vargas is my new pet project. So let's give him all of the hype, and hopefully he'll continue to develop and pick the U.S. when that time comes.
So for this game against Leon, a big one for Seattle. They got to finish the job in Mexico. No Ymar. He had a high ankle sprain against the Galaxy. He will not play. Nico Lodero back in training today. Raul Ruiz-Diaz not in full training as Nico was, but was seen running around. Seems pretty clear that he will not be on the field here. Do you think they get through? I mean, this is the MLS scar tissue that we have, where a team goes up 3-0 and didn't give away any away goals, and we're asking, will they get through, as opposed to, I don't even know what the alternative question is for MLS teams because we've never had to ask it. Will they get through, Seth?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think another thing that we've all lamented in the CCL and in past years is how these MLS teams come in sort of in their preseason or early season, and they just don't really seem to be all the way there operating at full throttle. But I think what we've seen from Seattle in the first leg in CCL and in MLS play is that they're ready to go. They seem to have a lot of continuity from last season, and I think that they just outclassed Club Leon by so much in that first leg that it's hard to see even on the road them losing a 3-goal deficit. And now I'm fully prepared to be
Blame
proven
Seth.
wrong.
Blame Seth. We have it on audio now. We can replay this at the end of that match. You are an easy scapegoat now, Seth Vertelny. Of course, that's game on Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Leon hosting Seattle with a 3-0 aggregate lead for the Sounders. FS1 2-yen. Let's talk NYCFC in the top spot. They have a 3-1 aggregate lead. They are in Guatemala to play Comunicaciones tonight, Tuesday night, FS2 2-yen, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we've got already the customary images of fireworks outside the hotel, of a massive crowd and a band. This is not a gimme for NYCFC by any means, Seth.
No, for sure. I mean, anytime you give up that away goal, it gets your nerves rattling a little bit. I think that they can take heart in the way they played in that first leg by giving up that goal. And I think talking about the Sounders with some continuity. Same thing for NYCFC. They're the defending champions for a reason. They still have Tati Castellanos somehow. I was just waiting for him to get sold all off season, and it never happened. And so, yeah, I think despite giving up that goal, you again have to put them as pretty strong favorites to get through. And again, I am prepared to be proven wrong, but usually these heartbreaks happen at the hands of Mexican teams, and so I still feel pretty good about NYCFC going into the second leg, even if their sleep patterns were disrupted a little bit.
For you, where does NYCFC occupy the hierarchy in MLS these days?
I mean, they have to be right up at the top. When you look up and down the roster, weaknesses are as difficult to find as their championship banner in Yankee Stadium. So I had to get that reference in somehow. But yeah, I think the young players in their attacking line that they have all have been performing at a really high level. And I think when you look at a guy like Tavis Magno, like his first season where it was kind of up and down, but he has such a really high pedigree, and I think that he's going to improve even more this year. And so, as long as they have him, as long as they have some of their other young attacking players playing well, and as long as Tati Castellanos is still there, it's hard to see them dropping too far in the power rankings this season.
All right, Pro Soccer Wire, open wide. It's coming sometime this spring. Be prepared for it. Go follow Seth on Twitter. Appreciate your time, man. This won't be the last time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, CCL coming up this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Doyle, give me your quick thoughts on NYCFC, and we will get out of here on the Power Rankings show. Twitter Spaces has not been our friend today. 4-1 win for them this weekend, we should have mentioned, against Montreal, but we've already turned the page to CCL. And Matt Doyle is muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm going to turn it around on you and ask you to give me your thoughts on where NYCFC are in the hierarchy in MLS right now. It's an interesting question, right?
I think at the very top, like if you're talking about the top group, they're there. Whether it be the regular season results they've gotten, whether it be sort of the transition as far as the team building aspect and how they've leaned into a different identity than they started with, and how successful that identity has become. And it doesn't seem like they're going to rest on their laurels in that sense. Whether it be last year with Santi and Tyus and Andrade, and now you've got the 20-year-old winger out of Brazil that they're bringing in, or Keaton Parks, or moving on James Sands at the right time, or even Joe Scally before that. It just seems like they have sort of figured out the sweet spot between player recruitment and coach recruitment as well to sit at the top of this league for a long, long time. Now, we haven't made a single banner joke yet, but there is a growth opportunity for this club that doesn't have anything to do with the on-the-field product, and that is getting their own building, and we know how difficult that is in New York. I mean, it cannot be overstated how difficult that's going to be. But I think if you see this team at some point get into their own building, I don't know when and if that'll ever happen, they will have the sporting side to pair up with that to be one of the strongest teams across the board in the league. Every single aspect of what they do. And that's really exciting to see, and I hope it happens, because if New York City had that building, if they had a place to call their own, you would have a really, really special soccer environment. And they already create that at New York Yankee Stadium as well, and they get results too. So soccer-wise, at the very, very top, and striving to be even more than that, I think, New York City FC.
Yeah, and we both expect them to, if not get a win, at least get a result that puts them through tonight, right?
Yep, and then if they do that, then it's, then they're rooting for what? They're rooting for Seattle, right? And or maybe not. Maybe they want Leon, actually. Like if you're looking kind of at the way these results have gone, maybe they want Leon, and they have to see a path forward, because with Tati still there and with the level of talent they have, Concacaf Champions League is very much within reach. We said it on Extra Time the other day. This feels like the year. This feels like an opportunity that if MLS lets go, may not come back. You might have the Monterrey teams in there. You might have a resurgent Copa America after they've been embarrassed in their Mexican season so far. So this is an opportunity they got to grab. New York City's got to be the one to do so. Right now they're number one, but Seattle Sounders still alive. New England's still alive. We didn't talk about Montreal on this show, but they're still alive as well, despite being down 1-0. All right, we're out of here. Go listen if you missed any on MLS Today, the podcast feed. Go check out MLS Today there as well, every single Monday through Friday. David Goss bringing you up to date on everything in MLS, and then MLS After Dark. Adios, everybody. Enjoy CCL, and subscribe to Extra Time. We'll be back on Thursday. See you.